all of you who are watching this particular episode, I must share that it'll be an interesting conversation because we have got two very, very interesting people on this program. We've got Lieutenant General Parvinder Pannu, who commanded one of the most important corps of the Indian Army and later was the Deputy Chief. And then we've got Saikrishna, who is an engineer, was with the Indian Revenue Service, was with NTRO, and now is one of our entrepreneurs in a very exciting tech space. We'll start with you, and the question is about the name of your company, which goes back to Chanakya. Why don't you start with that?
So this is a very, very deeply profound question that we have pondered on before we named the company. Like I said, this cyber domain, the cyberspace encompasses everything. The cyberspace cannot be limited by boundaries. So we started with the fundamental understanding that cyber must be seen as a domain. Now, when you see something as a domain, what are the important constituents of a domain? So Chanakya has brilliantly put it into a theory called as Saptang theory of state. It covers all the 7 arcans. Now, what are the 7 arcans that Chanakya envisaged? King, ministers. Now, we can comfortably replace king and ministers with the government and the policy advocacy or parliament and other mechanisms. Then there is army, someone who is protecting that space. Then there is people who live within it and do business in it. And there are friends, allies, mitra. Then we have treasury. Of course, we all need finances, economy to move it. So if you see it, the whole domain is encompassed with this beautiful term of Saptang. So we have took inspiration from that terminology and named our company as Saptang Labs to communicate not only to our customers but also to our own employees that we intend to work with all the 7 important components of the domain.
So that brings me to you, General Panu. I mean, he has articulated Saptang. You have lived this life. Are we fighting wars of yesterday or are we prepared for wars of tomorrow? That's my first question. My second question is that what would the war of tomorrow look like before we go back to Sai?
Subrata, with Sai being here and he spoke about Saptang, when he was describing Saptang, I started looking at multi-domain operations. That the wars of yesterday and today, because I don't want to miss today. A war of today has got something of the past and something of the future. So actually we are fighting with 3 different doctrines in our head and 3 different models which come from ideologies of equipment that we hold. Certain equipment is legacy equipment that we have been fighting our wars with. Certain equipment is now more digital and is today's equipment, which very soon is going to go into something which is futuristic, and some of the future technologies have also started getting inducted. So we have these 3 types of yesterday, today and tomorrow as it is into our current equipment. And our doctrines and war theories are also slowly transforming into a future. So from his Saptang, when you talk about the multi-domain operations, really I can also count about 7, that Army, Navy, Air Force, so land, air and sea, cyber and space, 5. And then you can add 2 more because when you're talking about the half front, you're talking about the homeland security, because every person, whether outside or inside in the hinterland, Indian national and needs security. So homeland security is extremely important. And that is the 6th element. And the 7th element is the military industrial complex, the scientists, the technology, the research and development, and the industry per se, because they are the ones who are going to fight a future war. So Saptang really adds on to that. Well, when you design a campaign, I will start from yesterday and I will bring it to today and tomorrow, is that earlier we always felt that you can attack an enemy, or when enemy attacks you, he is not going to attack you physically, he is going to attack you from a distance. Maybe artillery guns are going to be fired, or they will fire anything which are like arrows, shooting arrows at you from a distance. And then use the brute force after you have been weakened a bit. And using a brute force would mean that they are now physically, clashing, without any gap between 2 bodies. And then, of course, you capture those areas and you've got to dominate those areas and you've got to consolidate in those areas and transfer those captured territories and make it part of yours. But today, where we are is that we have stopped capturing territories first. We have started capturing minds. Information warfare is the one which is the first capture. Why do you want to capture the minds of people is because if you have to actually go to war a little later, you're basically making sure that your adversary is wrong-footed. He takes a wrong decision. I'll give you an example of our having been wrong-footed by China in 1962. It was a war not to be. We were wrong-footed and we landed up fighting a war, and you know the outcome of it. So to make sure that we are not wrong-footed, we have to make sure that our intelligence, analysis, and whatever action we take is A, preventive. Secondly, we should not lose ground or manpower. And thirdly, we should be so aware of what is coming next so that we can counter it. The future is going to be cyber-oriented. So earlier we used to have the aerial campaigns, or today we have an aerial campaign. So you have an air campaign first. I think tomorrow we're going to have a cyber campaign. And if the adversary or if the defender can survive the onslaught of a cyber offensive, I think only then the air campaign and the deep strikes and others, will happen. Otherwise, the cyber campaign itself will give you a first test of the ability of a nation to survive. And I think large number of nations will completely capsize only through the first attack, cyber offensive.
That takes me to you. Before we get into the details, can you just scope out that as someone who has been in NTRO, someone who understands this space, someone who is in the space, how do you see wars of tomorrow overall?
So, like I think what General Panu has rightly pointed out, I would borrow a couple of phrases from what Chinese thinking on current wars is. Because Chinese, let me go back a little bit into the history. Like, Chinese have a history of documenting things very, very rigidly and very, very clearly. Now, if you look at the latest doctrines of Chinese, they talk about winning informatized wars in local circumstances. So their perception is to win informatized wars in local circumstances.
What does that mean?
So informatized is a very loosely designed word to talk about free flow of information between all war fighting units.
Okay.
All concentrated in one small location. Now look at it. We are talking about Russia and Ukraine fighting. Is all Russia fighting? Is there conflict everywhere? No. Is there conflict everywhere in Ukraine? Not really. Occasionally maybe, but not really. So is Israel and so is Hezbollah. So now we are talking about highly localized conflicts, which are not technically maybe declared as wars in most of the circumstances. Hence we have another term called MOTW, military operations other than war. And we have also started talking about something called as no war, no peace. Now in these contexts, cyber becomes very, very efficient tools. Primarily because cyber also has a predefined advantage of being anonymous. Correct? It really becomes difficult for you to pinpoint who launched an attack on you. But it is not really difficult to identify who benefits from your attack. Now the point being, think about this. When Galwan was going on, we had a big trouble in the power grid in Mumbai. Now does it literally fit into what General Panu was talking about? Someone was trying to tell us, watch your back. If I can do a power grid in Mumbai, why can't I do a power grid in Delhi? Why can't you do a power grid in your Eastern Army Command? Whole Guwahati, Arunachal, all of them. Then what? It's a message. It's a message. See, the primary purpose in my understanding of the future of war would be use cyber and information warfare to demoralize the enemy. And also remove his ability to strike. And at the same time preserving option of surprise to you. Look at how Russians use cyber warfare. They use the cyber warfare to neutralize the satellite routers of the Ukrainians. They had no idea that Russians were marching in. After the damage is done, it's too late.
Sai, you've touched upon something which is quite close to a nuclear doctrine. That you go nuclear and you don't expect the enemy to survive, and then the enemy comes up with a second or a third strike capability. Are we saying in the cyber theory also there can be a second strike capability required? Because if you don't survive the first, then you say the ability to strike as a counter, that is also required. to what you have actually been really hit upon very badly, but to have a second strike capability?
Sir, I think it's very interesting to draw a comparison with nuclear doctrine and cyber doctrine. But I will first start by explaining probably what are the differences that we must notice. The first notice is if you build a nuclear weapon and you have reliably designed a launch capability, you can be assured that you have a capability to affect the enemy reliably, reasonably. Whereas in cyber, it's not really that simple. You might have built a cyber weapons which will bring down the power grid of a nation. But you can't be sure about it. You have to check it every day. Because there could be a small software patch. That small software patch can nullify your cyber weapon anytime. So that's fun difference. Now second part, let us say you survived the first cyber strike on you. Now what does it mean? Let us say a country has targeted India in a cyber strike. Now India is able to withstand the first cyber strike. What does it mean? The India has nullified the surprise element for the enemy and is able to defend its own command control infrastructure, which also means India's plans are in motion, their plans are out of action.
So that is precisely, if you were to design a cyber campaign, would you design it the way you have described, or would it go into more specifics?
Sir, it would definitely go into more specifics, because if we are looking at building cyber warfare capabilities, again, a more conventional strong enemy, because cyber warfare is generally aimed at a conventional strong enemy, not really at weaker enemies. Now, if you're looking at a conventional strong enemy, let's say for the sake of discussion, China, for example, our preparation must be more thorough, because there is a huge difference in the way you would plan for an adversary like China and others, because Chinese have their own software products, their own infrastructure, their own firewall.
I want to ask a question here. You mentioned the power grid in Bombay when Galwan was happening. Just for the people who are watching who don't understand this, what are the assets which can be immobilized due to a cyber attack? If you were to do a ABC.
I understand. So basically now this is a public information. Let's say, for example, the Americans have started calling something called as critical infrastructure after the 9/11 attack.
Okay.
So what are the critical infrastructure? Any infrastructure whose disruption or has a debilitating impact on the economy, public health, law and order, and of course national security. These are how they defined it. Now think about it. What are the things that comes to your mind? Dams, big buildings, which house the stock exchange and others, power grid, any of them. If this infrastructure is bombed or disrupted by any person, it would have impact, disproportionate impact. I think to use the exact phrase, it's called debilitating impact. Now imagine the same thing in cyberspace. Now instead of you bringing down a dam, you simply lift up the gates through a cyber attack. And don't be surprised, it happened. It happened in places. But thankfully the dams are small, so we got away. People didn't.
But it's happened in India?
Not in India.
Okay.
Not in India.
Or maybe shut all the gates.
Shut all the gates.
And the whole dam goes at some point.
All the dam closed down. So now these critical infrastructure, we have an organization called National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. It comes under the Prime Minister's office. Now they have designated around 6 sectors, which are considered as very critical for our economy, for our system, for our country rather. So very interestingly, of course, the power, telecommunications and all of them come. Very interestingly, they've also added strategic public enterprises. Now here they are actually talking about the military industrial complex, effectively we have in India. Now in the time of war, let us say our BEL or BHEL stops producing things that we require, or the BDL stop producing missiles. MRI, Research Center, Imarat, all of them shut down. Then what do we do? So this is exactly why the thought process is slightly on a larger scale when it comes to planning.
This is fascinating. Now my question to you therefore is that for someone who doesn't understand it, how do you shut off or open a gate of a dam through a cyber attack?
So today, sir, let's say you are the engineer, you installed a gate in the dam. How do you think you will switch on and switch off? It's connected to a control system?
Yeah.
Okay. So where is the control system located? Near the dam, ideally?
Okay.
Correct. Now you are, let's say, you are the electrical, you are the irrigation secretary, or you look after the huge project or something. Where do you want the control to be actually? In your office, right? Where is your office located? Is your office located near the dam? Where do you want it to be?
Well, so that goes through the...
Exactly. So
can you also explain the SCADA system?
I'll explain. So these are all, see, these control systems are loosely called as ICS or SCADA systems. So ICS and SCADA systems are used in almost all manufacturing units, dams, generally all important stuff that produces items, manufacturing, everything. So these units generally run on SCADA, and SCADA is a very delicate system. I'll give you a simple example. In pharmaceutical industry, if you are trying to make a vaccine or trying to make any compound, you have to exactly mix two chemicals when the temperature of both of them reaches 50 degrees centigrade. Not a milli-centigrade above, milli-centigrade below. So this supervision of this activity is done by SCADA systems.
Okay.
Now these SCADA systems are generally the number one target of a state actor in cyber war. Look at the greatest of all the examples, Stuxnet. Stuxnet is an example where allegedly the Israeli and American intelligence have destroyed the centrifuges used in Iranian nuclear enrichment facility, Natanz. So this is again same SCADA control systems. I'll briefly explain that. I think that will clarify a lot of things to your audience as well. What does SCADA really do is, it spins a centrifuge. The SCADA's job is to power the machine, power the motor in such a way the centrifuge spins. And the SCADA system has a human control interface. It is supposed to show to the operator the speed at which the centrifuge is spinning. A normal software, control system software, would actually measure the speed of spinning and replace it here. What the software bug or vulnerability that the Americans and the Israelis allegedly exploited is, it kept on showing random numbers while doing exact opposite to the spinner. Let's say it is saying you're spinning at 20,000 RPM. What the actual commands that were issued to the motor were, spin at 40,000 and slow down to 4,000. Then spin at 20,000, slow down to 2,000. So because of this sudden activity, what happened is the spare parts, everything got worn out and the centrifuge destroyed. Whereas the operator was looking at the screen, is continuously seeing 20,000 RPM, going good.
So this is the extent of infiltration which can happen.
Yes. This actually happened. This is how the Iranian nuclear program was set back by at least 3 to 5 years.
So you, having commanded a corps, if you were in battle, what would keep you awake now? Suppose you were told that there will be a war or prepare for a war in 24 months. What would keep you awake?
See, at the moment, we are into a very hybrid mode. We have some analog mechanical systems and we have some digital systems. We haven't gone autonomous yet. But the flip side or the drawback that we have is that there is sluggishness in information, sluggishness in decision making, not to be able to take the right decision because you don't have the right inputs for it. You need a lot of inputs and more important is timely inputs to take a decision. And by the time you can comprehend the entire situation and you start mobilizing your forces to a point where they are required, you can A, be late, B, you can be mobilizing to a wrong place. You can also have a problem that you are not supported, that the troops are there, but the air is not ready, the missiles are not ready, or the logistics are not in place. So the kind of synchronization that has to happen to make sure that your response mechanism is in a sequence and in time at the right place at the right spot is extremely important. So therefore, when you go, why do you want to go autonomous? You want to go autonomous is because you want simultaneity and to match, or not only match, but outmatch the ability of your adversary to cohesively do any damage to you, such as if they build up at a place, then you should be able to decipher whether this is a deception or this is not the real attack. They are deceiving you, but the actual intent is hidden, and then you're always looking at something that you are not seeing. So the actual offensive may not be coming here, it could be going somewhere else, but they are all the time trying to build a scenario that is coming here. So you will land up sending all your forces, all your logistics, all your wherewithal in that area while something else unfolds somewhere else. So all the time, you don't want a game of guessing that is happening and keep your troops in a state of mental fatigue and alert when nothing is going to happen, and bring them to a rest where something is going to happen because it's so many days that I have been just worried and I'm trying to make my movements here and there, and you find that now nothing is going to happen and I have all my data. Then when all these things happen, nothing happens, and all of a sudden something happens. I think this worries any commander a lot. So therefore, overnight if Kargil happens, Why do you think it happened? Because people realized over a period of time nothing happens here. But precisely that is what happened
Ended
here.
up happening. So that brings me to you. Tell me, what do you do? I mean,
Let's take this as an example.
Yeah,
of
I
what
just want
General
to.
Panu was talking
Yeah,
about.
I just want to know, what do you do?
So now look at the scenario that General Panu was expressed. Now you have today, every battlefield will have many sensors. So now we are already talking about a term called as Internet of Military Things, Internet of Battle Things. So many sensors will be deployed. Even today we do that, and those sensors keep on reporting their status to you. Today, most of the commanders, they use that information, or at least they are trying to use that information to make sense of what's happening in and around them. Are they properly prepared for an attack, or is there an attack impending, or they are unnecessarily wasting their deployment? They are trying to make so many decisions based on the sensors input that they are getting. Along with the sensor input, they're also getting input from various intelligence agencies, satellite imagery, drone flies, local scouts, human intelligence collection. You see, a job of a battlefield manager is extremely difficult. Now, the challenge number one that he has is how much of this intelligence is actually believable. Let's say you deployed a sensor. Now the sensor is reporting, let's say it's a small sensor which is deployed deep under the earth. It is able to say that there are 200 people marching above me. Should you believe that information? If you believe that information, what are you predicting? At least one or two companies invading you? That changes everything. What if the enemy has plugged the device out and forced it to send an update saying that 200 people are marching over me?
Amazing.
So the first fundamental job that you have in this space is to be able to trust your own devices. Now I would say the device that you have deployed, now the device could be possibly in any of these, let's say 4 or 5 states. State 1, I am active, I am okay. Stage 2, I am active, I am in low battery. Stage 3, I am active, I may be under an interference, a possible interference, because I'm not able to connect back to you continuously. So I know that someone is jamming me, someone is trying to pull me out, or someone is trying to hack me. Fourth, I am active, but I'm compromised. So unless and until we build technology to differentiate each of these scenarios, I am feeding my own battlefield commander absolutely dangerous information. This is one scenario. Now look at the scenario other way around. Now I am going good. I am transmitting information that 200 people are coming. I'm not able to communicate to you because I'm jammed. This is scenario 2. Scenario 3, I have communicated. Now my battlefield commander is trying to communicate back to the infantry unit located near. Do this decision. Execute plan 5. Now that command is not reaching all of them. 4 of them have received it, 5th one, 6th one did not receive. So now all of this collectively we call as providing information and cyber cover to this whole operations. Now here we also add information warfare, what General Panu was talking, propaganda. So there are reinforcement arriving. It's a fake news, you can just plant it.
To wrong foot.
To wrong foot the enemy, to wrong foot the enemy. Or you can see that you have ordered, let's say, 10,000 kgs of rice or 10 tons of rice. What are they predicting? So this type of information, this also, so these two important components are of great interest to me. So item number 1, providing safer cover. Item number 2, preventing exploitation of the sensors and hardware used by our forces to identify them uniquely using radio fingerprinting and other technologies. Second, exploiting enemy sensors by confusing them or planting evidences, which will take them on a wrong foot. So it involves components of defensive cyber and offensive cyber.
You have said two things, but I still want to know the antidote to it. If there is a fake news or information warfare or psychological warfare happening, do you also work on a system that you say this is fake and this is real, so that I'm not reacting to something and get wrong-footed, and I'm reacting to something which is genuinely there? So how do you separate a campaign which is based on a fake news or a psychological warfare which is impacting our minds negatively, also giving the right information so that the morale of our own troops is also high, that it is not that you're losing, actually you're gaining, if that is the right scenario. And second thing is that if there is a first wave of cyber attack in the cyber campaign, how do you recover from that? Do you build something that you cannot be brought down, or do you have something that you can recover quickly, or a bit of both? So I think if you have the first and the second answers right, I think neither will you be wrong-footed nor will you do the cyber campaign. So do you work on these kind of systems?
Yes, sir. So this is where the AI agent comes into play. Now, AI agent is expected to collect enormous amount of data from each of these sensors.
You say AI
Agent,
artificial
intelligence agent.
Imagine it
it.
has to be your agent,
Yes,
not a double
yes.
agent. Huh?
No, sir, it cannot be. It cannot be because this agent is programmed, prepared, planned on what your requirements are. And it runs autonomously within your network. No internet connectivity needed. So what the AI agent will constantly do is take the feed from all these sensors and keep matching it. If one sensor is communicating 200 people I'm seeing, no satellite imagery, no infrasonic, no sound, how is it possible? I may be getting cyber input saying that there is no food ordered from the enemy side. How is it possible? So it is able to proactively identify that this sensor is compromised.
So it's like a triangulation.
Correct, sir.
If all three points of convergence are confirming it, it's true. If two are converging, one is negative, then you need to analyze more properly. Or if two are saying no and one is saying yes, maybe it is false.
Exactly, sir. But this is still advisory to the battle commander. Because at the end of the day, the battle commander knows the best. So AI continuously, like the bot that we have already built, actually can evaluate your war plan in a battlefield scenario, score it and say, this is your battle plan, but if you make these changes, you have a higher chance of success. Because of these sensors and sensors that are verified and trusted, AI is in a position to simulate the activities of the enemy vis-a-vis you. Now I'll come to the second part, sir, the cyber warfare one.
Cyber defense.
Cyber defense component.
To survive.
Yeah, cyber defense to survive. Now, if you survive the first wave of cyber attack, it naturally means your systems are up and running. And generally in these scenarios, your counterattack is almost in milliseconds.
Milliseconds?
Instant. Yeah, instant nearly. The moment you determine.
Counterattack would mean that you kill somebody who's trying to kill you? Or kill anything that you are within your reach?
Like I said, so it's AI agent which is making the call. Now the AI agent has understood it's in DEFCON 1. It's in a state of war. Because it could see continuous attacks on the infrastructure that it is watching. Then what is it supposed to do? All it needs to identify, ascertain who is it supposed to protect or who is supposed to attack. It refers an SOP. The SOP says attack these targets. It attacks them. All in milliseconds time.
This is frightening. Now the question is that what exactly do you do? What is it that you are doing which will benefit the country?
Sir, we are building these in-house capabilities to develop models which will help Indian Armed Forces understand the battlefield better and make their conclusions more reliable by ensuring identification of the devices, fusing data from the devices, running AI agents on the top of them so that the battlefield commander makes sense. Otherwise, the battlefield commander is just overwhelmed with data. Everybody sending reports to the person in the field.
Agreed. So my question to you is, therefore, in the earlier part of the conversation, the way you narrated the complexity of the situation, I mean, you are saying that 6 sensors, one is saying that 200 people are coming, the other is saying there are no footfalls, the third is saying there's no order ration. It just scopes out the complexity of the network, as it were. So are you saying that your company is trying to delve deep into this and build the network?
Our company is trying to delve deep into various alternatives that you can develop as a battlefield commander. It is even more frightening because I also, at the same time, we have to look at the impossible things like terrain. Now there is a terrain in the middle, there is a mountain in the middle. Your tank regiment cannot move. Or maybe there are tanks that can move, but do you have those tanks? And the width of the road is only let's say 5 feet or 6 feet. How will you move your heavy artillery and others?
So in terms
all
of
these scenarios.
Great. So in the stage of the journey you are in, your company is, where exactly are you to, creating proof of concept or?
We are in a state of proof of concept.
Okay, and it's working well?
Yes.
And what are the challenges you're facing?
So the challenges is the battlefield realities are far more complex than we are simulating today. So it's a journey, and that journey cannot happen unless and until we work very closely with the armed forces.
Got it.
Like I'll give you like for example, I think the better way to phrase all this is, I built multi-domain command control, plus to enable the battlefield commander to wage mosaic warfare. I'll give you a couple of examples. I talked about 6 sensors, right? In reality, the sensors could be 50 to 100 to 200. And each of them will be coming from different origins. Some of them could be Russian, some of them could be even Chinese, some of them could be Israeli, some of them Americans. Each of them have totally different way of representing realities. Now the system that I built has to fuse all of the data and present one common picture to the battlefield commander. And in this aspect, we use multiple layers of LLMs and models to make sense. Now let us say I am showing this data to the battlefield commander. Now we still have one more challenge. How will he converse with it? How will he interact with it? I mean, to borrow a phrase from Bhagavad Gita, this is Vishwarup Darshana for the battlefield commander. He will be overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
So most of the things that doesn't require his attention, the model automatically takes care of.
I have 2 questions in addition to what you're saying. My first question is that globally, this kind of work that you're doing can be done by others as well. It requires a lot of intellectual heft and imagination. That is understandable. There's a tech piece. So where are you in that journey vis-a-vis the world, and who are your competitors?
With all humility, I'm sure there are many other people in the world who will be working on these challenges, but I would say the cutting edge work in this space is very quietly being done in America for the last 10 years.
Okay.
Not today, last 10 years. Okay. The very concept of mosaic warfare, which General Pannu modified and made it more relevant for India, stands as a guide for us. So we try to pick up from there and start remodeling our imagination of how India would fight this war.
And where are we in that journey?
As a country, I would say, sir, not many people. See, now, like you rightly said, building a solution like this requires a fusion of completely different talents. One is you need someone who understands sufficiently how military works. At the same time, not be full-time in it. You need someone who understands the value of intelligence and offensive activities, coercion, all that stuff. So that's the second component. Third component, good understanding of machine learning, models, technologies, challenges. At the same time, cyber, and same time, information. And you should have all of this combined together and still find money to fund this, and be able to talk to government and deal with government procurement models to be able to actually sell it to them.
So the question is that, do you have adequate talent in India to fuel this dream?
Sir, truth be told, it's really difficult. But I will tell you one thing, sir. Most of the employees that I have, most of them start as freshers. But I have found them always to be extremely dedicated. They have fire in their belly. Only thing you need to do is to buy them time so that they catch up with these challenges and build a deeper expertise. Let's say now most of my employees who work on these projects, they can have one-on-one direct conversation with anybody in the armed forces because they speak the same language. And it took us 3-4 years to bring them to that level. Now 3-4 years of continuous dedication from their side, from our company side, at the same time with great support receiving from the armed forces. Only then we could actually head into a conversation. Now that we are getting into a conversation, now I believe something will actually happen. Now, how many companies can survive 4 years like this? The challenge is this, sir, even within the armed forces, the jargon and the language that Army speaks is very different from jargon and the language the Navy speaks, the jargon and language A speaks. All of them speak very different languages, very different jargons. And all of them generally would be talking about a same technological problem, but custom fitted to their different jargons and use cases. And they have different standards because their operational platforms are very different. But deep down, if you see as a technology, it's the same thing. Now to decipher whatever they are asking us to build, to understand, oh, this is exactly what they are asking, we already have it. That itself is a tough journey for us.
Jalpanu, after hearing Sai, what are the thoughts you are left with?
See, we now have the CDS in place and we have integrated defense staff, which is functional. And the weapon and system integration, of course, is a concern. And we have organizations now within the IDS who are doing weapons and system integration, in which, of course, jargon is one level that, in fact, when I was heading the training of the Army, Navy, Air Force as Deputy Chief, we actually tried to reduce the jargon into common jargon. so that we have staff college and staff college, so that we start teaching common jargon to the three services. Second thing is the technological application and language. Sometimes the requirements are similar, sometimes they're not so similar. So therefore, the industry needs to be interfaced right from the drawing board stage. And therefore, we have the Army, Navy, Air Force design bureaus which have come up. And these design bureaus are the ones who are actually giving the problem statements to the industry, and industry then through either IDEX challenge or direct response to the design bureaus can come up. But the issue is that still there is a huge difference between the capability that the industry has, which the military is not aware of, that the industry has that capability. And many times, and more often than not is the case, that industry does not know what the military is actually looking for. And if this can be done...
Just to take over from what Sir said, so like I said, that's also the primary reason why I've left government service to start this enterprise, because I've realized one thing, sir. The private sector has a very different understanding of government, and they knew very little about definitely the security services and the armed forces in India. Very limited knowledge, and because of the confidentiality reasons and the work culture that we have within the security services, which is very secretive, they will never tell what they want to the market. So what happens is they simply keep saying, this is not what I want.
But they don't say what they want.
Exactly. They'll never tell you what they want.
So where are we in that journey?
We have come very, very far. Even in the last 7-8 years, we have done phenomenally well. Now, I genuinely am very optimistic that in the next decade, India will not be the top importer of weapons and armed equipment. I would believe India will be one of the top exporters.
Absolutely.
We have all the right things done. All we need is a little bit of hand-holding for the industry.
Would you like to say something more before we wind up?
So we live in the exciting times, and I hope to work very closely with the armed forces. And
is there something that if someone of authority was to be watching this, what would your single request to that person be, if he had one?
Sir, only one request would be, please ask your team to be more patient with Indian enterprises. And Indian enterprises I'm talking about the startups and the MSMEs. Be a little bit more patient and try to give them intellectual property rights. If you don't give them intellectual property,
there's no enthusiasm for it.
They will never work on improving it.
Yeah. So I think IPR is something which we need to discuss separately, perhaps, because it's something which is very close to my heart. I understand IPR well. General Pannu, last thoughts.
What Saikrishna is doing, he cannot do it in isolation. He can do a lot. For example, he was talking about the mosaic warfare. You need a good GIS platform. Now, GIS platforms cannot be built by small startups, because you need huge amount of survey, you need digital maps, you need maps which are commonly used between not only Army, Navy, Air Force, but also for cyber and the space warriors. On that GIS platforms, you have a common algorithms which are plantable, and he would be able to tell in more technological jargon, how do you plant information on a GIS platform? The cyber information, the electronic information, the geospatial information, the information which has come from ISR or your PNT, which is more to do with your positioning systems, or your at exact time what was where, and in the moment where to track it, where it has gone. And then you should be able to communicate in real time all that you see and all the reaction that you would want to achieve through either targeting or taking a proactive action, or to only watch. So I think the government agencies, the industry, the scientific community, such as the R&D of the DRDO and the ISRO, all of them have to start sitting together. And not that they're sitting together, but I think largely this kind of a work is being done by the PSUs like BEL. And I think BEL is largely now saturated with far too many elements attached to it, but I don't know whether they can deliver the right thing or not. So if you're going to actually invest only on few large DPSUs or PSUs, then you're going to leave out the private industry and the agility that the private industry can bring. The agility that small time, very quick moving, scientific oriented youngsters can bring to the table. And you should not create a system where you say everything will happen from a PSU and you will find large number of youngsters who can actually bring to the table huge amount of future technologies should not find a way elsewhere. The world is open. I think we need to do a great kind of a ecosystem building to make sure that Saptang Lab or Saikrishna equivalents are brought into the ecosystem to make it more agile, inclusive, and development oriented. I think that is what is extremely important.
I think that's a fascinating conversation, and I'm just sort of taking it in. Thank you very much.